I'm glad our next guest came on because he got some news in the last 24 hours after we booked him that it's not new news, but it's reestablished news that he is the front runner in the GOP field for U.S. Senate to go against Bob Casey in the fall. It's Sam Rohrer, the real true conservative in the race, and thank you for coming on. You're beating the polls. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. You've had a great lineup this morning and just a tremendous job.
Well, what's your reaction? The new polls is you're still trailing Casey, but you clearly have the best shot and you're the most popular among the Republican candidates. How do you react?
Well, I felt very, very good about that. We have sensed that. We have known it. In this race, Adam, I'm the only one who's ever been in office or run for office. The other candidates have not. And that's made a very big difference, I think, as people look and say, well, who should we trust? Can we trust them? They're at least able to look at my record of my 18 years in the House and know exactly where I've stood and voted on all of the conservative issues, constitutional issues that are of so importance to protecting our freedoms. And I fought for them. I've been there. And I will intend to do the very same thing if I go to Washington, because you and I both know we are in deep trouble relative to the abridgment of our constitutional freedoms in this country on every hand, and this president and those in Washington, many of whom are his enablers, including our own Bob Casey, are those who are needing to go, and I'm ready to go down and stand up and fight for what's right.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Casey as an enabler next, but the obvious thing that's going to come up, it's not entirely fair. You're leading now. You've been leading. You're not the establishment candidate, in contrast, and we'll get to that. But is it fair to, what do you say to people who say, well, you're Pennsylvania's Mitt Romney, for better or worse?
well, there's one thing I can say about that. I am no Mitt Romney. I don't share his millions, and we don't have a couple Cadillacs in the drive either. But I will tell you this, that there's a huge difference between Mitt Romney and me, and one is that I have a historically conservative record where I have never flip-flopped on issues, and I have opposed anything that even looks like a Romney care or a Hillary care from years back when Hillary first tried Hillary care. And we all know that this thing didn't have a start 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's been in its moving stage for a long time. So no, I would not be like Romney on hardly any degree, although I do, if the people pay to send me to Washington, I am going to stand firm, I am going to stand tall, and they will know where I am, and I will not be flip-flopping.
But you will enthusiastically support Romney or Santorum, I guess are the only ones to be talked about, or a brokered candidate, if they are nominated. You'll still
obviously so. I mean, we will need to do that, because I do not want this president back in office, and there must be a move in the right direction. That's why we've got to change the makeup of the Senate. People are not looking at that as much as they ought to, because, God forbid that this President Obama gets back into office, but regardless of which candidate is president, if the Senate does not move out of the hands of Harry Reid and move into the majority control, and I would say Republican control, I'm saying that conservative constitutional Republican control, we need a few more in there in order to make a difference. If we don't get that changed, you'll see the same kind of gridlock and problems that you're seeing right now. So the Senate is critically important, as people who listen to the program should, understand.
Let me ask a question about your comment about Bob Casey as an enabler. That's an interesting choice of word, because let's face it, Bob Casey does not create the same reaction in people that Chuck Schumer or Barbara Boxer or one of the really obnoxious Democrats in the Senate does. But
no, I don't think you're correct, Adam, and I think the main reason for that is that Bob Casey has not been forward and front on anything, and those other individuals you have, they speak out. But the problem is that Bob Casey has been 98% voting record with this president. He has been there with him in every effort to, want to raise the price of fuel, to shut down the drilling for gas and oil, making ourselves dependent upon others. All of the things that this president has wanted, Bob Casey has been there with him. So that's why I term him an enabler. He may not be out there as a cheerleader, but he has been there as a support in giving the votes, which have caused this Obama agenda to continue forward. So that's why I use the term enabler.
Essentially, he is just a reliable vote, if not a face.
That's correct. He may, like I say, he may not be out cheerleading, and frankly, as you cross the state, people hardly even know about Casey other than his name because they've never seen him for these last 6 years. But he has been there with reliable votes for the Obama progressive agenda.
Now, let me ask you about the Pennsylvania State Committee, the powers that be. They are not supporting you. They're supporting Steve Welch, which the public, based on the latest polls, he's only, matching up 49 to 29 against Casey. What happened with that, and what's the effect, and why is he not catching on, besides the fact that you're a better candidate?
Well, I think what happened is that the party, the governor himself, particularly stepped in an overarching fashion, opposed to all precedents, and twisted arms of state committee people. I mean, literally, Adam, threatening people with loss of their state-paid jobs if they did not go along and vote for the preferred candidate. And this is all in the light of the fact that folks in the Southeast here particularly weren't on board to support Steve Welch, and they twisted their arms. They got their votes, but they didn't get their hearts. And what's happening across the state is that people, the grassroots, are just fed up and sick and tired of the party leadership, whether it be in Harrisburg, Washington. They're tired of people in elite positions trying to tell them what they ought to do and making up their mind for them, and they're reacting strongly. And I think that what the polls are showing, is what we're seeing on the ground, is that people are looking at Steve's face and saying, you are the face of the establishment, those who have left behind the people, and we're not going to support you, we don't support that. And I think that's what it's run into a buzzsaw. And I think the party's hung an anchor around his neck, certainly didn't put a booster under his seat. Yeah, well, Steve at least has a much younger, probably better-looking face than the Tea Party establishment deserves. But I think part of that is, he's a very successful engineering entrepreneur. And he's likable. His book is very good, but his passion is clearly in entrepreneurship, and he made a lot of money early in life. He's younger than I am. But do you think there's an element that the state party can sort of manipulate him as someone who's never held office, who is thrilled for the endorsement, as opposed to someone who has political experience? Well, I think they're going to try to do that, but they have really created and plowed a very deep ditch for him to climb out of as they've gone forward, because literally the knowledge of what has happened has fallen out across the state, very deep, very wide, and anybody, even if they don't know about it, if you even mention to it, their automatic response is negative. Remember, there was a poll taken, an extensive poll statewide, the primary voting Republicans in the state, 84% of them said to the party, do not make an endorsement, let it open. 84%. So that is what you're finding wrapping up in these responses. People say, wait a minute, I don't like it, I don't care who it is, what qualified or not. Not the case of Steve. Again, he's not been in office, and I'm telling you in a nice way. I have nothing against any of the candidates, not at all, and I speak nothing negative against them. But there is a real distinct difference here between sending somebody to Washington who has never read a bill, doesn't know how to read legislation, never cast a vote, to step into the limelight in Washington, where you're not just making votes that affect Pennsylvania, you're affecting the entire country, and literally, because of your votes, whether it be on treaties or matters of war or whatever, you're literally affecting the world, and that is just a really high risk for anybody, if not needed, for the voters to send someone there to that position. I mean, it's not like an entry-level position. You're talking about the United States Senate. This is critically important. I think people are understanding that. You picked up an endorsement yesterday from Gun Owners of America, or at least earlier this week. Can you explain where you stand on that? Now, for people who don't know, Gun Owners of America is a little less establishment, more grassroots than the NRA is. Not that I have a problem with the NRA, but can you talk about you versus the other candidate on gun rights? Well, yes, I can. And here again, on the Second Amendment, in defense of Second Amendment, I, in my 18 years in the House, have been consistently 100%, all of the time, unequivocally, which is what the Gunners of America endorsement letter said. They cited portions of letters that I had written, which I frankly had even forgotten about from years past, where I stood firm and I took the lead on opposing any effort to infringe our Second Amendment rights. it's the same as I have done on the other amendments of constitutional freedom as well. And that's what they cited. And they said, we don't have to guess about Sam Rohrer. We know where he is. He has fought the battles. He has stood firm. And in contrast to the other candidates that maybe they say they are. Remember, Bob Casey said he was Second Amendment also, but then he votes to approve to the bench people who believe the Second Amendment doesn't apply anymore. And that's the difference that the GOA was talking about. We know where Sam is. He's been there. He's been alongside of us. We're not afraid to stand with him again. As contrast to the others, we hear words, but we have no evidence whatsoever that they even understand it, let alone will actually stand up under pressure.
I don't know if you heard any of the show earlier. I know you're busy and you're not often within the Philadelphia listening area, but Brett Mandel was on talking about the fiscal crisis, tax revenues, etc., and just wondering if we could hear what you have to say about financial policy.
Well, you know what? I did listen to Brett, and that was a very, very good interview, just talking about property tax reform in Pennsylvania. I will tell you on the financial part, again, I don't want to get buried down on the property tax, but when I was in the House, I led the fight to eliminate school property taxes across the state with a way that would have been revenue neutral, which is what he was talking about. If you're going to make a change, make it revenue neutral, not a revenue grab, as the mayor he's talking is intending to do. But the situation such as property tax reform and the way we fund public education, which is the thing behind that, are things that describe the kind of magnitude of issues that are fronting us in Washington and in the state that only are kicked down the road. People talk about it but never do anything about it. In that case, I laid out the recommendation for how we could change the way we fund schools and eliminate the property tax, which would be a tremendous boon for Philadelphia. And I've actually sat down with Mayor Nutter 3 years ago and talked with him how that could be done. And frankly, doing what we talked about with using the sales tax as a way to replace it, it would benefit significantly Philadelphia. And they could get rid of all of that assessment problem and all of the property tax problem. And again, I went after that from the perspective that the protection of our property is a guaranteed right on the Constitution, and the way it is now, no one owns their property. We only rent it from government. We lease it, and that's why that is a fundamental issue. It needs to be corrected, and it's got a solution. Brett's right on the money.
Let me follow up with a question in an op-ed by Harry Wilson. I don't know if you saw it, but Harry Wilson, full disclosure, is a close friend of mine from college, but he also almost won as comptroller of the state of New York in November 2010, and he's a turnaround specialist who's involved in politics as well. He wrote in his New York Post op-ed, "I've seen far too many mismanaged companies default on their pension obligations, leaving hard-working employees and retirees with empty promises. What are you going to do to help prevent that?"
Well, there are a couple of things. One, he was totally right. I read his article that he wrote. He did a tremendous job, and he's right on the money. I fought for pension reform here in Pennsylvania, and it's the same thing on the federal level with all of our entitlement programs. The financial underpinning fact that underneath of it all is that it is unsustainable, and as he quoted Herb Stein as saying, if something's unsustainable, it's likely to come to an end. That is the whole point of it. If we do not quit talking about these issues that are driving up our deficit in Washington through overspending, through a range of issues, through these entitlement programs, which include our pension programs. If we do not substantively address them now, and there are ways to do them, it is ways to do it. If we don't do it, they will stop, and everybody is going to be left without absolutely anything. And you tell me then what the circumstances are going to be in this country when all of those on public pension programs wake up one morning and they have nothing coming into them. This is absolutely, it's an immoral circumstance. It's financially irresponsible to talk and not do anything about it. And there are solutions. We can talk about that more later, but you're totally right on the money.
Yeah, we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left, so I do want to get to another issue because you had an op-ed, which I published on Chai95.com, on Israel security. It came out on the day of Purim, which obviously has passed now. We're getting in Passover mode. But just want to thank you for your strong stand on Israel, and just see if you have anything to add. A lot of events have happened in the last week or so since that op-ed came out.
Boy, Adam, they have. I tell you, every day is a new day when we look to the Middle East, and I wrote that article on that because it really struck me as a most appropriate time to tie together the real life reliving of history almost when you look at Haman in Persia of the days gone by with Jews and the Mordecai and Esther, and now Mahmoud Ahmadinejad here in Iran, who the same threats exist today. The reliving of history is something that is just most amazing, and if we do not learn from history, we're going to repeat it. And so I look and I say, Israel, understand, we are with you. I am with you because of our common heritage, and anyone who stands up and wishes to think genocide, to think destruction, must be opposed, and we must stand together of those who hold common beliefs and common values in God and in our Judeo-Christian viewpoint. We must stand together because the enemies are common.
Yeah, you just brought up genocide, and it occurred to me, because this is a big issue a lot of the time. In April, there's a big Armenian community in Philadelphia, and they have a march for simply recognition. One thing about the Holocaust is people recognize it occurred. The Turkish government still tries to act as if the murder of 1 to 1.5 million Armenians in 1915 simply never occurred. And, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue because some people vote, it really cuts across party lines. What would be your position on recognition of the Armenian genocide as a senator?
I think that to remember incidences of historical fact is an extremely important part for upholding truth and justice. And I would, as a senator, recognize and be a part of recognizing and remembering those kinds of incidences so that, for the purpose, we do not repeat it again. And the fact of the matter is those kinds of things, whereas they are not of that magnitude yet. I mean, you're seeing things happening in Egypt with Coptic Christians and so forth. You're seeing a number of things happen across this world right now where it is only the beginning stages of what will end up in the same kind of thing, just because of the nature of man and the hatred that goes along with that. If the light is not shined, and if we do not stand up and bring attention to it, so I am strongly in support of both remembering that and being a part of those who recall what happened and lend my voice and my heart and my mouth to supporting and remembering, so that we do not repeat.
And I only have about a minute left. First of all, do you mind coming on again, perhaps next week? Because I have more questions for you, if we can schedule it. I know you're really busy.
Adam, I'd be glad to be back on with you again. Absolutely, I'll try in every way possible to make the time available.
Sam Rohrer, front runner for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate. Just in about 30 seconds, I don't know if you heard Tom Trento's thing, but CARE is attempting to suppress free speech in Pennsylvania. In about 15 seconds, any comment there?
Well, comment there, real issue. Everybody needs to be very much aware of it. The Human Relations Commission has been a problem before, and any kind of uniting as we're seeing happening in this regard must be exposed and must be stopped.
Radio Hour with Adam Taxin.